So welcome to day 6 of 8. After this lesson, we'll have 2 more days. And we'll talk about what the schedule is for the rest of the week in a minute once we get more people, once we make sure that everybody's in that we want in here. So my name is Dustin Myers, and I'm an instructor for Lambda School. And I am a software developer, programmer, and I've been a teacher and mentor at boot camps and programs similar to Lambda School. I have a degree in photography and took a boot camp class a few years ago and was able to switch careers. And I'm one of many people who have found success through a program like Lambda School, and I recommend it to a lot of different people. And in fact, since I took that class, my brother, my sister's husband, so my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, so my brother-in-law the other way, and my cousin have all, those 4 very close people to me have all gone through a boot camp and have all successfully graduated and found jobs as programmers. And so I believe in this kind of a program and love to see people become successful and switch careers into something that is better for them and for their family. So that's why I'm teaching here still, as I really feel like I get the chance to help you guys make a difference in your lives in the same way that this kind of program has helped me and many members of my family. So that's my feel-good speech for you. So we should have about as many people as we are going to get on here tonight, hopefully. So let's talk about the schedule for the rest of this week. We don't have class tomorrow because it is 4th of July. But we will, so we'll do the last 2 classes this week on Thursday and Friday. So just remember not to get on and come to the link tomorrow because we won't be here. You're welcome to try and join, but we won't be here. I will be out celebrating with my wife and kids. Okay, awesome. Let's jump into our lesson today. It is a big one, a good one. There's quite a bit to it today, so we'll get going right away. So we want to go to Chrome. Don't need any of that one. Okay, here we go. So today we are learning about data structures in JavaScript. Yesterday we learned about functions. And so we're diving deeper into kind of these more complex building blocks of JavaScript. The 2 data structures we'll be talking about today are arrays and objects. So we'll start with arrays. An array, a JavaScript array, is a storage container for collections of data. What is data? Data is data types. So it can be strings, it can be a number, it can be other arrays, objects, etc., etc. Okay, so any kind of data type in JavaScript can be stored in an array. What's really cool about this is it gives us one point of reference for a lot of similar types of data. What does that mean? Well, we've been talking a lot about being dry in our code, right? which means don't repeat yourself. So we're talking about being dry. Let's imagine that we want to create a data store or create data points for a list of Avengers. So list of Avengers. Your first key that we want to use an array is that we're asking for a list of something. But we're not going to do that. We're going to look at the other way that we could do this. So we're going to say Avenger 1 equals Iron Man. Const Avenger 2 equals Hulk. Const Avenger 3 Captain America. Const Avenger 4 equals Black Widow. I don't know if you've been able to tell in the last week and a half, but I'm a huge Avengers fan. Okay, so let's look at this list of Avengers that we have. We notice that there's a pattern emerging from all these variables that we're creating. We're listing we're naming all these variables very similarly because they're a list of very similar things, right? So we've got the name, then all of these different variables are given the string as the value. So there has to be a better way in JavaScript that we can write a collection of things, a collection of data, and do it in a more dry way. So we're going to say that the above way is not the way to do it. Don't do it like that. Bad. What we want to do is create a new variable, and that's going to be an array. So how this is done is I've put the instructions up here. We declare a variable, and we set it to these straight brackets right here. So const, we give a variable name. We're going to call it Avengers equals open close brackets. We've now created an empty array. And then add however many data types you would like, comma separated. So arrays are comma separated lists of data types. So we're just going to move everybody into here like so. And now we have a much better, more dry way of writing this list of Avengers. We've got one data point that we need to reference instead of 4 data points that we need to reference, or that we need to remember when we want to reference our Avengers here. Awesome. So there's now a lot that we can do since JavaScript knows what an array is, that this is a special type, JavaScript type. And because it's a kind of a special JavaScript type, there's some special things that we can do with arrays. All arrays, if you remember strings, let's look at Avenger 1. Strings have a property, right, called Avenger 1, called length, where we can see what the length of the string is. So the length of Iron Man is 7. Well, arrays have a similar property called length, where we can see how many values are being stored inside that array. So the way we look at that is the same way that we look at string properties or other properties for other JavaScript types, you do the variable, then a dot, and then the property name, which is length in this case. So we see that Avengers has a length of 4. Outputs 4. There are other similar kind of properties that we can use with, or that arrays have. If you go to MDM array, MDN is awesome. Okay, so the other property is just prototype, which we're not going to worry about right now. Arrays have a ton of different methods. So these are all the different methods we can use with arrays. So we're going to look at that in just a minute, though. Okay, so we've got the property length. So we can take this variable, this set of data, and we can find out how many items are inside the array with dot length. Now let's talk about how we can kind of manipulate this array. So we're going to talk about accessing or assigning items or values. We'll just call them items. Accessing or assigning items inside arrays. But in order to understand this and be able to do this successfully, we have to understand that arrays use zero-based indexing. And what does that even mean? This brings up a couple of things we haven't really talked about that we need to learn in order to understand arrays. So indexing is the way that your computer stores this data that's inside the array. It's going to create an index in its memory of each item that is inside the Avengers array. In normal human thought line of process, line of thinking, we would think that you would start indexing at the number 1, and you'd say number 1 is Iron Man, number 2 is Hulk, etc., etc. So that's what we would normally think, right? But JavaScript arrays use zero-based indexing. So the base of the array, the first item in the array, is actually at index 0 instead of index 1. So it actually starts with the first item is stored at index 0, and then the next item would be index 1, etc., etc., etc. Zero-based indexing. This is really important for us to know, because if we want to try and access one of these items from the array, then we need to make sure that we're thinking in this zero-based indexing paradigm. So if we want to find out what's the very first item in the array, instead of accessing it with the number 1, we would actually access it. Actually, let's look at what that prints out. That gives us Hulk. Not Iron Man. In zero-based, with zero-based indexing, this is how we access the first item in an array. So now when we run this, it's going to output Iron Man. So this is really important to think about, and you'll mess it up quite a few times. You'll have some problems with your code, and you'll be like, what's going on? And then you'll remember, oh, I got to use 0 instead of 1. Or if you're trying to get Captain America, it's not Avengers at 3, it's Avengers at 2. So yeah, got to remember that. What if we have an array that we don't know how many items are in it, which happens a lot. You won't always know how many items are in the arrays that you're working with. How would you access the last item in an array? So the way we access the first item is really easy. We know it's at index 0. If we don't know the length of an array, then we can't access, then we don't know what index is going to be the last index. So what do we need to do? What do we need to know in order to access the last item in an array? We need to find out the length. So we use dot length. Easy peasy, we just learned that. So if we want to access the last item in an array, we just learned up here that this is how you access items with open and close braces and then a number. So we need, inside the braces, we need any expression. Let's go up here. Use braces to access items in an array. Inside the braces, give it a JavaScript expression that will evaluate down to a number. So hopefully that makes sense. Actually, let's move this. We'll keep that right there. So what that means is inside the braces here, we need something that will evaluate to a number. Well, if you put a number in there, that's going to evaluate to a number. Pretty obvious. But what did this output? Avengers.length. That outputs a number. So we can actually just copy this, bring it down here and paste it right inside here. But real quick, this is a little bit of a gotcha. This isn't actually going to work. This evaluates down to a number, but it's actually a number that is too high for our array, because we know that Avengers.length is going to output 4. So what is at index 4 in this array? Well, let's run it. Avenger, let's see, Avengers, there we go. We'll run it. Undefined. There's nothing at index 4. You might think it's Black Widow, 1, 2, 3, 4, but remember this is 0 base, so this is actually 0, 1, 2, 3. So the last item in an array is always going to be Avengers.length minus 1. It's good to wrap this in parentheses just so you can see. Actually, you can do that with, remember you can wrap expressions in parentheses like that. But we're okay not to do that. So to access the last item in an array, use dot length minus 1. So now we're outputting the last item in our array. Woohoo! Cool. What about assigning items in an array? We can use the same idea, but instead of accessing it, let's actually set it to a new value. So let's say Avengers at 4. We don't have an Avengers at 4, right? That comes through undefined. So let's give it a value. Let's say Avengers at 4 equals Hawkeye. Yeah, I knew that looked weird. Okay, so now we come down here and we say Avengers. Let's actually print the whole list. There we go. So there's our original 4, and then we got Hawkeye tied onto there. We're just gonna go ahead and copy and paste that right there. Cool. So now we've added Hawkeye to the list at this point. If we had tried Avengers at 4 up here, it would still output undefined because we haven't given it a value yet, right? We're gonna put that under here. All right, so that's how we can assign items. You can override items as well. If we say Avengers at 2 is now going to equal Spider-Man. We get Spider-Man, and then we look at Avengers again. Instead of, who do we have before at 2? Captain America. Instead of Captain America, now we have Spider-Man. So you can override values inside an array, and you can assign values to new indexes as well. Okay, let's see. All right, so let's come down here. We'll call this reassigning values in an array. All right, so let's take a look at some of the methods that we saw over here in MDM. We've got a few that are pretty important to learn, and then a few that we're going to learn towards in our second, I think on Friday in our last lesson. But we're going to start with some of the main ones. So let's make, I want to first talk about this up here. You'll notice that we set Avengers as a constant. But down here, we're doing all sorts of manipulating. We're assigning new, we're adding new things, we're reassigning values. That's because we're not actually, although we're changing what's inside the array, the data point that this is stored at just knows that it's an array, and that's the value that it is being held as, is just an array. It's not an array of Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, Black Widow. So you can change what goes on inside an array. What you can't do is say Avengers equals a string and run that. So Avengers is read only. Okay, so you can't do that. But you can mess with what's inside the array itself. For better or for worse, there are some problems with that. If you ever want to look at functional programming, then you write code in such a way that you never, ever, ever affect what's inside an array. You use new variables and new arrays. But yeah, that's something you can look up later on. Okay, so let's do a new array. Let's say colors, since we're so original. All right. This is another way you can. This is another way to write out or define an array. You can do it all on one line like I did up here. or you can give each item in the array its own line like this. Both kind of depends on the code base you're working on and the decision made by the development team at that point. Let's do, since it's almost 4th of July, let's do red, white, and blue. Don't forget that even when you're writing this, they need to be comma separated. So don't forget that. Okay, but we're going to start with red, white. Let's do const America colors. Okay, so what do the methods push and pop do? Push and pop is a way to add new items or remove items from the to or from the back of our array. So up here, we assigned a value to the 4th index in Avengers. We assigned the value Hawkeye. That's because we knew that when we defined Avengers that there were only 4 items, and we could add a 5th one at index 4 without any problem, without reassigning a value accidentally. But again, like I said before, a lot of times we don't really know everything that's inside the list. And it gets kind of tedious to do things like Avengers dot, even though this would work, Avengers dot length plus 1. It gets kind of tedious to do this all the time if we want to just add more and more values to the back of the list, which is a very normal thing to do, is add more items to the back of an array. So because it's a pretty common thing to do, and we don't want to continue to write things like this all the time, we get methods that do that for us. So to add something to an array, dot push adds an item, we'll say a data type to the end of an array. So if we say America, we'll say American. That just, I guess either way works. American colors dot push. Okay, this is a method. In other words, this is a function, right? And so we're going to invoke this function, and we're going to pass it a parameter, or we're going to pass. Ooh, I mixed it up. I did it backwards. We're going to pass in an argument into dot push, and that's going to be the value blue. And then we're going to take a look at American colors, and we see red, white, and blue. So dot push adds a value, or you could add multiple values, I believe, maybe, yep, to the back of an array. So let's actually do that. Let's say yellow. And we'll give the output down here. Perfect. And then we look at this, we say, oh, duh, American colors aren't red, white, blue, and yellow. They're just red, white, and blue. Dot pop to the rescue. Dot pop does the opposite. It will remove the last item in an array. Okay, so we're going to do American colors dot pop. This does not take an argument because you're just you don't need to pass it a value to remove. It knows it's going to remove the last item, so we're expecting it to remove yellow. So when we do that, it should output something like red, white, and blue, like that. There we go, red, white, and blue. So we took this original array, it has 2 items, and we pushed on the back of it or at the end of it, the color blue, the color yellow, and we got red, white, blue, yellow. we decided that we didn't want yellow in there, so we removed the last item, yellow, with this method pop. And it outputted red, white, and blue. So how do we do that for that's for the back of the array? What if we want to do it for the front? We're going to use shift and unshift. Just real quick though, let's look at what these values, what this returns, because this is a JavaScript expression, and so it's going to evaluate down to a value, and it will dot push actually has a return statement written into it that returns the new length of American colors. So in this case, it returned the number 4, telling us that American colors is now 4. We can actually, if you ever wanted to, you could set that to a variable, array length, capture that in a variable, and let's take a look at what array length. Oh, I am misspelling things left and right today. There we go. So we see that array length, we captured that the output of this JavaScript expression inside this variable, and that now outputs 4. So whenever a JavaScript expression evaluates down to some value, you can always capture that inside an array. Like that concept actually took me a long time to like really internalize, and it's definitely a game changer once you're like, oh yeah, duh, that of course would do that. This one is kind of cool. .pop actually returns the value that it's removing from the array. So that can come in handy if you want to remove something from the array but still remember what it is. You can capture that in the variable as well. Removed item equals American colors.pop. Down here, we'll just run that and see what it returns. There we go, yellow. So definitely can be helpful in different circumstances. Okay, let's keep those like that. Let's just separate these a little bit because not like that. Makes it a little bit easier on the eyes. There we go. Okay, so .push, .pop. Let's look at shift. So let's go American colors .shift, and we'll give it a string, and we'll say green. Let's see what this returns, and then we'll look at the resulting array. Huh, interesting. Shift green. What is the resulting array? White and blue. Well, I think I did that a little bit wrong. Let's take a look at MDM, the description of shift. Okay, the shift method removes the first element. Oh, it's because I'm thinking of it backwards. I was thinking of that it was the kind of the similar to push, where it was adding a value, but shift is removing a value. So if we run that, we'll say .shift removes the first item of the array, and it returns the item it removed from the array. And then this is going to output the resulting array. Okay. That confused me at first. I apologize. Let's do this one up here. Dot unshift. We'll do the opposite. It will add an item to the beginning of the array. So we do American colors dot unshift, and we're going to add a string, and we're going to say green. Then it should return the new length of the array. So let's comment these out so we can run this as our last line of code. 4. So let's see. Let's walk through this real quick because all of these are still going on, still happening before we get down to here and get 4 in our output. So let's just go step by step, just how the JavaScript engine looked at all these. So American colors equals red and white, this array with 2 values. We pushed 2 more values, and so we had red, white, blue, yellow as our output. Then we popped 1, so then we were left with red, white, and blue. Now we unshifted, which means we're adding green to the front of the array. And so now we added green right here, right? So now we're at an index with the length of 4. That's why 4 was in our output. So if we look at American colors, then we should see, run that. We should see green, red, white, and blue. So now, if we uncomment these, we did a couple more things here, so this isn't going to output white and blue anymore. So if we're at green, red, white, and blue when we're down here, so we're going to shift or remove the first item of the array, and that should return the item. So it's returning green to us right up here. Now we should have red, white, and blue back again. Boom, there we go. Those are the most, or those are important ones to know right now. We'll learn some more complicated and even cooler methods later this week. So what's really cool about arrays is we can actually loop over arrays just like we've learned, have been doing for loops. We can use for loops with arrays. So we've learned for loops like this, var. That takes me back. There we go. Let I equal 0. I is less than 10, I plus plus. This is how we've done loops so far, right? We want to loop 10 times and do something, run some expression 10 times. Well, let's redefine let's use our Avengers list again. And remember, a lot of times we don't know the length of an array. We don't know what items are in an array. So we don't know if we want to loop through every single item in an array and do something to it with every item, then we have length to know how many times we have Avengers.length to know how many times we want to loop, right? We don't know if it's 10, we don't know if it's 5, we don't know if it's 500. So instead of hard coding a number here, we're just going to go ahead and put Avengers.length. This evaluates down to a number. Right now that number is 4. Actually, it's 5 because we added Hawkeye in there and replaced Captain America with Spider-Man. So I think we're at 5. So this evaluates down to that number, and it's as if we had written I is less than 5. So now we're going to loop. We're going to run this for loop 5 times. And for each time we loop over the array, we want to console.log our Avengers at that index. So we're going to access each value and console log it. What does that look like? Well, we have this variable I that starts at 0. We know that arrays in JavaScript use zero-based indexing. So on the first iteration, I is going to equal 0. So if we put I inside here, and we want to look at Avengers at I, then the first time this logs, on the first iteration, this is going to log Avengers at 0. On the second iteration, this is going to log Avengers at 1, et cetera, Avengers at 2, Avengers at 3. For each iteration, this number is going to increase by 1, right? And we're going to console log the next Avenger in the list. Boom, there we go. So iteration, let's do this. Let's make this all fancy like. Iteration number, we're going to say plus I plus 1. And then, we're going to turn this into, we're going to log that. And then we're going to say plus that plus Avengers at I. Okay, iteration number 1, we get Iron Man because I in that iteration equals 0, and the Avenger at index 0 is Iron Man. Iteration number 2, I is going to equal 1, and we're going to output Hulk. Okay, maybe that was a little too crazy. We'll go ahead and take all that away. Okay, so this is a very, 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 very normal thing to do in JavaScript. Write a for loop, access the length of the array to know how many iterations to do, and then do something with that array. Do something with each item in that array. Okay, awesome. Let's move on to objects. Objects are a collection of properties. Objects are a collection of properties. A property is an association between a name, or aka a key, and a value. So objects are basically collection of key value of key values, like that. Collection of these types of data structures. To declare a variable, or to write an object, we declare a variable const person, and we set it to equal to curly braces, like that. Now, why objects? The undrive version of this would be const, doing something like const name equals Dustin, const age equals 31, const teacher equals true, const hobbies. You guys get to learn all about me today. Ultimate Frisbee, biking, and coding. So we could write all these variables that kind of describe me, right? But that's kind of the undry way of doing things. So we don't want to do it this way. Instead, we use objects. So before, when we were talking about arrays at the very beginning of the lesson, we said a whole bunch of variables that were all very similar data types, right? Technically, you could have an array with a bunch of strings, a number, a Boolean, another array, an object, but for the most excuse me, for the most part, I've been talking too much these last 2 weeks. Whew. For the most part, arrays are, all the values in an array are the same type. So what happens in a situation where we want to describe kind of one thing with a bunch of different variables like this? Excuse me. That is where objects come in handy. Oh, so this is, we're going to call this person object so that we can name const person down here. Okay, so we're going to use key value pairs, key colon value. So instead of doing it like this, we're just going to say name colon Dustin, age colon 1, teacher colon true, hobbies colon array ultimate frisbee, it doesn't matter. We don't have time to correct it. Biking and coding. So now we have, again, just like an array, we have one access point to all this information instead of 4 access points to information that all kind of deal with the same person here. Okay, with objects, just like arrays, we can access and assign values, and there's actually 2 different ways to do that. We have dot notation and bracket notation. So let's look at person. Let's use dot notation. Let's access person.name Dustin. We'll go ahead and not console log this right now. There we go. Person.teacher is true. So we're accessing a property, a key value pair from person using dot notation. We can do the same thing down here, but with bracket notation, like this. The thing that will throw you off with this a little bit is that if we want to access name, we have to make it a string, like so. There's some reasons to do this. For now, most of the time we'll use dot notation, but there are some very specific reasons that we use bracket notation. There we go. Outputs Dustin. Let's just do this. So that is dot notation and bracket notation. So now let's set some values. Let's say person dot, now we get to name a new key value pair here. Get to name a new key, so we'll say person dot, what's another thing we can say about me? Eye color, give it a value, blue, and we'll comment these out real quick. And we'll say, we'll access that, and it gives us blue. Or person at, let's say, favorite food. I have to go with pizza. And then access that. This might blow up. I'm pretty sure you can set a value this way. Let's make sure. Yeah, pizza, we're good. Outputs, pizza. Awesome. So there's accessing and assigning variables, or not variables, excuse me, accessing and assigning properties on an object. There's this cool keyword thing that kind of defies all the syntax that we've learned so far in JavaScript called delete. And it's kind of weird. You would think that if you want to delete a property from our person, you would think that it would be kind of like a function where you go delete person dot favorite food, but actually is not how it works. This is the syntax for delete. The keyword space, the object, and then the property name. And it returns, as you can see, it returns a Boolean based on if it was successful or not. So if we did favorite drink, oh, maybe it doesn't do that. I lied to you. Okay, favorite food, and then we look at person dot favorite food is undefined. Outputs undefined. Okay, what about looping? There is a new loop that we get to learn. Yay! It's called for in loop. And there's 4 words that you put inside the parentheses here, which is really nice in a for loop, not a for in loop, but the for loop that we've learned so far. You have to write 3 different JavaScript expressions, full expressions inside the parentheses. A for in loop just has 4 words. So we're going to say sorry, I'm just checking one thing. Okay, so we're going to say, we're going to define a variable, let key in, and then reference our object, person. So we define a variable, let key, but notice we don't put a semicolon here. We don't set it equal to anything. We're just saying for key in person. This is why it's called a for in loop, for in, because of those 2 keywords in JavaScript. When you kind of understand these a little bit better, it's a little bit easier to understand what's going on here and why the syntax is the way it is. For now, just know that we are creating a new variable called key, and for every iteration, every time that we loop to a new property on person, the key is now the key of that object, of that of that property at that iteration. So let's just console.log key, and then also we'll do a space, and so our object person dot, so we can't do that. We got to use bracket notation here. So here's one case that we can't just say person dot key, right? This is where bracket notation comes in handy, because there is no key value pair, or there is no property named key on person. I didn't do key and set it to some value, right? If I had, we could do that. We could do person.key, but we don't have a key there. So we have to use bracket notation, and it knows to look at the correct key for the correct iteration there. So we've got key. Let's just do key, because that's outputting some pretty funny stuff there. Okay, so if we console log key, you see that it's the properties that we've defined: name, age, teacher, hobbies, and eye color. We also defined favorite food, but later deleted that, so that's not console logged here. So now let's do just person at key. Actually, yeah, person at key. And now we get the value of each key. So how did I do this yesterday? We did, there we go. So if we just console log key, we're going to get a log of all the keys in the object. The keys, again, are these parts right here in front of your colon. If we do person, so if we reference the object itself at key, then it's going to log all the values in the object. And we see that happening. So for each iteration, it's going to first log the key, then the value, then 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 the key, then the value. Let's comment those out. Okay, so now down to methods. And this isn't methods on an object like we talked about with arrays here, where we've got all these methods like this, because I want you to think about what we've been doing when we're doing things like this right here. We've got some variable, and we're using dot notation, which is what we just learned on objects. Objects have dot notation. And then we're running a function, which we've called a method. So this, we've called these methods, right up here, array methods. We're running a method from this variable using dot notation. So if you put all of that together in the sense of an object, then we can actually do something pretty cool. So we're going to define a new property for our person object. And this new property is going to be a function. So just like we have strings and numbers and booleans and arrays, we can actually have functions as a property, some function on our array. and it can do stuff. You can also drop this line down here, and that's pretty common to do like that. Oh, and then have another thing. Okay, so we can actually have functions on here. Now, when a function is specified as a property on an object, we give it a special name called method. So down here, that's what a method is. It's a function that is on an object. Okay, and just so let's say that say hi is going to console.log hi there, like that. Well, great. We run it, and we see that this evaluates down to a function, but it's not actually console logging hi there, right? That's because we have to invoke our function. Right now, we've just defined it. So how do we invoke a function, a method that's on a property? We do something that's going to look really similar to this with dot notation. So we've got our person dot say hi, and then invoke it. And there it is, hi there. Pretty awesome. So this is something that is very widely used, and we'll see it a lot more on Thursday in our class. So get really used to methods on objects. Okay, last thing that we need to talk about is this keyword. This is a very deep and confusing topic in JavaScript. It's very simple in what we're going to do today, but it's going to get pretty tough after this. So what we're going to look at today is if we have this method. Let's how do we want to do this? Const another person, and let's just give it all the same things. But instead of attaching this function later on, we're just going to do it here. Say hi, and now we've got this function on the object. So inside an object, when you have a function and you've got the ability to run some code right inside here, what if we wanted this to log hi, my name is Dustin? How do we reference the name up here? We could do something like, hi there, my name is another person.name, but that's a little bit cumbersome and not very dry for a lot of the use cases that we would do this. So instead, we're going to use the this keyword. The this keyword lets us access an object's own properties from within itself. So instead of referencing this object by name, we're just going to say this, and then we're going to invoke our function. Oh, I'm sorry, let's move all this. Let's move all this down here. And let's not invoke that one. Okay, so now let's invoke another person dot say hi, Oh, invoke it. Hi. Hi there, my name is Dustin. Woohoo, so we did it. Hi there, my name is, and then we used the this keyword inside of an object to reference itself to get access to one of its own properties. So you could say, I am this.age, and it would log this.age. I am 31, etc., etc. Ooh. Cool. So that is arrays and objects, and we a lot of stuff in here today. Hopefully the questions have gone well. I'm going to check out our Q&A chat real quick, but before I do that, if you need to sign off, then that is the end of our the lesson today. And again, no class tomorrow. We're going to have for 4th of July. So yeah, just remember that Thursday and Friday are going to be our last 2 classes together. Awesome. Okay. Let's take a look at Q&As to see if there's any other chats or anything we need. I can go over at the end of the class here. Mixed data types of one array. Yep, we showed that. How big can an array be in bits? Is there a cap? I'm sure it depends on your computer. You could run out of memory if you had a big enough array. Plus plus is the iteration. So it is the plus plus. When you do I plus plus, it takes the value of I, which starts at 0, and adds 1 to it for every iteration in a for loop. Or if you're just running it once on some variable, if you did const number equals 10, and then later on you did number plus plus, then number would at that point equal 11. So here's a question. Just to be clear, bracket notation will output the values in the object, but dot notation in the previous situation for in loops. Not sure I understand that question. Will output the values in the object. So let's look at this. Bracket notation, person at key. I'll share my screen real quick. We're looking at this question right here. Just to be clear, bracket notation, person at key will output the values in the object. So person at key, that's this right here. So if we run that, then we're getting the values of our person object. If we were to try and do console.log person.key, but dot notation person.key in the previous situation. So what does this do? It's going to give us a bunch of undefines. Every time it runs, it's going to give us an undefined because person.key is not defined up here. So if we had key equals I'm a value, and then we run that, we would get I'm a value for every time that we ran person.key. Because this is looking for a literal property called key, where this, if we just console log key, this is going to log a string of the key at that iteration. So the first time it runs, if we just look at it the first time, it logs a string with the value name inside it. So it's as if we had done name. So this is going to change. This is going to be a string, and it's going to go through with each iteration, and it's going to replace that string with a different string, like that. And then it's going to access the correct value of that key. Where this dot notation is looking for a literal property called key on the object, like that. That's why it's a really bad idea to have a property named key on an object, because as you can see, it could get very confusing. So inside of for in loop, we're always going to do bracket notation. So I hope that cleared that up. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool, awesome. Okay, looks like we've got all those covered. Have a wonderful 4th of July, everyone. If you are celebrating tomorrow, hope you are safe and have fun and eat lots of hot dogs and don't get sunburned, and we'll see you on Thursday. Thanks.